Greetings everyone, SoloFanDance98 back at it again with another reaction to Top 44 Best Super Sentai Movies of All Time. Now, we made it through the first 14 or so, I believe, last time, so we're going to be going to the next 15, then after that, the next 15 to finish off the list. Now, keep in mind that this will be based on the top 44. I'm pretty sure there's more than just 44 of these movies, but to be fair, if there's more than 44, I'd say they have a pretty good run so far. I'm liking some of the recommendations on this list. So let's go into it to see the next 15 recommended videos.
Next up is Gao Ranger vs. Super Sentai. This is a V-Cinema release.
Back.
Towards the end of this movie, it starts to feel more like what you would expect from a cute that will leave.
Refresh.
Next up is Gao
Why does it go back like 15 seconds every time it refreshes?
Ranger vs. Super Sentai. This is a V-Cinema release, but instead of it being team versus team, this is Gao Ranger along with quite a few classic Rangers from the franchise, like Big One, Red Falcon, and one of my favorite Pink Rangers of all time in Mega Pink, or Miku. We also have an appearance from every Red hero in history up to this point, and they just lay on the fan service here. I'm not sure, but when this released in 2001, it was easily one of the heaviest doses of fan service that the franchise had ever seen before. Throughout this movie, we explore the rich history of Super Sentai and the legendary teams that preceded the Gao Rangers. I know that Gao Ranger isn't the most loved of franchises within the Toku community, but this movie has a heavy focus on some of my favorite Rangers of the past, so it's definitely worth a watch, especially if you're a fan of Big One, Red Falcon, or Miku. This movie walked, so 199 Hero Great Battle could run. Next up at number 29 is Abaranger vs. Hurricaneer, and this is a V-Cinema release. This film is considered non-canon due to contradictions with both series timelines, but Abaranger and Hurricaneer are two really great Sentais that make this a good versus movie that you won't want to miss.
No kidding, I remember seeing the Dino Thunder versus the Ninja Storm Ranger version in America, and honestly, it's pretty good actually. I liked it very much.
In this movie, the Aberrangers meet Furabijo and Windinu, who ended up in Dino Earth after surviving the events of the Hurricaneer finale. It turns out that they are now in an alliance with the Evodians. The evil duo of Furabijo and Windinu release the evil ninja Iga, so they have to team up and take him on.
Sí. Entendido.
As far as the story and plot goes, this is a pretty standard versus movie, but it's very entertaining, and the quality of these two teams make it maybe a little better than it deserves to be.
Honestly, if that's the case, I want to see that one in its entirety. That one sounds awesome compared to the show that the episode special, I guess you could say, that we got. It was still pretty good, but I want to see how the original went.
Next up is Tokume Sentai Go Busters Returns vs. Dobutsu Sentai Go Busters. This is a V-Cinema release that serves as an epilogue of Go Busters. On December 31st, 2012, the great demon lord Azazel shows up in the world of the Busters and is able to pretty much smoke them in battle. Enter, God, awards Cheetah Nick with a special prize for being the 1 millionth death of the year. Congrats. And the prize is that he can wish for anything except for the death of Azazel. Nick wishes to go to a world where the incident from 13 years prior never happened. This is kind of an interesting premise, and it's cool to see things from a different perspective and with a new set of circumstances. Of course, this film features the Dobutsu Sentai Go Busters, a slightly different looking take on the traditional suits to go in line with this different world. I give them major props for doing something so wildly unique and different with this story. I feel like the cast of Go Busters is really good, and if they had just made a simple, more standard Go Busters movie, it probably would have been successful. But they took a big risk and did something unique and original, and I think they hit it out of the park with this one, especially in terms of originality.
True. Oh,
next up is Kamen Rider and Super Sentai Tyson. This is a theatrical release meant to commemorate the 10th anniversary of TV Asahi's Superhero Time. This movie has a lot of heroes, but focuses mostly on Gokaiger, Go Busters, Kamen Rider Decade, Fulzit, and Oos. Basically, if you're a fan of Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, this movie was made for you. We start out with Captain Marvelous being a direct threat towards the Kamen Riders as he seeks to gain the ultimate power in the universe with the Daizangyak fleet at his command. At the same time, Kamen Rider Decade leads Daishocker once again to defeat all Sentais, so we have a direct conflict between these iconic characters in which both of them want to wipe out the entirety of each other's franchises, which sounds like a pretty explosive conflict, because it is. This movie has a crap ton of fan service for fans of both franchises, as you'd expect. And the Captain Marvelous vs. Tsukasa angle makes this movie feel like a huge, big budget, heavyweight matchup that you will definitely want to watch.
No
I
kidding,
really wish
that's
I could
a lot of Kamen Riders and Super Sentai Rangers all
see
together.
this one on the big screen.
Okay, I need to remember that title. What was it again? Kamen Rider X Super Sentai Tyson. Okay, I'll have to remember that one because that one looks awesome.
Next up at 26 is Lupin Ranger vs. Pat Ranger vs. Q Ranger. This is a V-Sin X release that takes place roughly between episodes 42 and 43 of Lupin Ranger vs. Pat Ranger. This is another versus that is successful mostly because of the likability of these teams, because they are freaking likable. This was the first Versus release to cross over 3 teams, although it only crosses over 2 series. Both of these seasons have really unique vibes, so it's super entertaining to see how they play off of each other and how their personalities interact. The story isn't anything crazy, but this is another very high quality Versus film, and if you're a fan of these teams, you will definitely enjoy this movie, but if you're not a fan of these teams yet, give this a watch anyway, and it might change your mind. Next up at number 25 is Kyoryuger vs. Go Busters Dinosaur Great Battle. This is a theatrical release that takes place after Go Busters and between episodes 36 and 37 of Kyoryuger, featuring the title teams, but also featuring the other dino teams, Zyuranger and Aba Ranger. Along with the classic Rangers, we also have some clone versions of classic Sentai villains such as Grifferzor, as well as the resurrection of Enter and Escape. The team interactions are excellent, especially Amy and Yoko, and it's cool to see the classic Dino teams join together along with the Busters for a really good mix of modern and retro.
I like it.
Next up is Geki Ranger vs. Bokenger. This is a V-Cinema release, and the continuity here is a bit unclear, but this is a great standalone Versus release with 2 teams that, in my opinion, are quite a bit underrated. This movie features a very interesting story about a red jewel with a mysterious origin that will see these Rangers traveling to South America. Geki Ranger is easily one of the most unique Sentais, and with Bokenger being the adventure Sentai, we get a ton of adventure here with some really cool scenes, and I think this is a great standalone project, meaning if you're just in the mood to watch some Sentai but you're not really sure what, this would be a good one to throw on. Number 23 is Go Busters vs. Gokaiger. This is a theatrical film that takes place between episodes 40 and 42 of Go Busters. Gokaiger is obviously an insanely popular season, and Go Busters gets a ton of love from within my community, so I think that this movie is a no-brainer for the list.
Fair enough.
This is a story about Zangyak and Enter attempting to find the Phantom Ranger keys that are supposedly powerful enough for the wielder to conquer the Earth. Obviously, that's not a good thing, so our heroes are gonna have to stop them. I found this movie extremely satisfying, meaning that the interaction between the Rangers here, as well as the scale of the action, was even bigger and better than what I was hoping.
Whoa!
Next
Deca
up is
Ranger?
Magi Ranger vs. Deca Ranger, and this is a
Did I say
V-Cinema release that takes place between episodes 31 and 32 of Magi Ranger. Magi Ranger is another underrated Sentai, in my opinion, and in this movie they team up with Deca Ranger, an absolutely hilarious season, and one of my favorites. This is a story in which Urara gets captured, with the ransom being an item called the Flower of Heaven. The story is fine, but the interactions here are definitely what makes it. Both teams have so much personality, and Umiko and Hoka being on the screen at the same time is an absolute treat. These two have enough personality for the whole damn movie, and this film will absolutely brighten your day.
Oh, there we go.
Next up is Kamen Rider and Super Sentai and Space Sheriff Superhero Tyson Zeto. This is a theatrical release, and it is a sequel to Superhero Tyson, but obviously this time we have the addition of Space Sheriff from the Metal Heroes franchise. The catchphrase of this movie is "Get up, all superheroes, all of space versus all of Earth." the one and only ultimate battle begins. Catchy, right? In this movie,
I was wondering
the three
about
different
that.
franchises fight against each other as you would expect, and then eventually team up to fight Space Shocker. Yes, Space Shocker. This movie is mostly about the Go Busters, Kyoryuger, Kamen Rider Wizard, Beast, and Gavin. And I think you'll get the most enjoyment if you're a fan of all three franchises, but if you just come for Go Busters and for Super Sentai, you'll definitely get that. They just share the screen with Kamen Rider and Space Sheriff. This movie, like its predecessor, is meant to dump fan service, and this is a huge movie that feels big budget. Another one that I would have loved to see on the big screen. Next up is Go Onger vs. Geki Ranger, the movie. This was planned to be a V-Cinema release, but it released in theaters to celebrate the 15th entry in the Versus series. This movie has various continuity errors that make it hard to determine the timeline, so I view it as kind of non-canon, but the story here is fun, and this
I was gonna say, it can get a bit confusing when you mix the franchises, or in this case, the generations.
is a great standalone Versus film, starring two pretty excellent teams that can both be pretty lighthearted and fun at times, especially with the Geki Rangers training the Go Ongers. I think these two teams are pretty underrated in the community, and I think that this film is a good showcase of just how much fun, excitement, and charm these two Sentai seasons have. This movie was the last time that Geki Ranger would appear together as a team, so if you're a fan of Geki Ranger, you should definitely watch it for that reason. And there's just a lot of charming weirdness here. Like, I especially love the training segments when the Geki Rangers are teaching the Go Ongers things like catching a bunch of leaves and playing the piano with toes. I love the goofiness in this movie, and if you're into that kind of vibe, definitely check this one out.
Nice.
Next up, we have Deca Ranger vs. Abba Ranger. This is a V-Cinema release that takes place after the events of Abba Ranger and between episodes 31 and 32 of Deca Ranger. Another movie with two great teams from two great series.
アバアバアバアバアバレンジャ何それ
First off, this movie is filled with very funny interactions. Obviously, Deca Ranger is filled with a bunch of insane people, but I think the charm and likability of the characters from Abba Ranger
At least he can admit it.
really mesh well with them. We start with Abba Ranger stealing Deca Ranger's car and crashing before being arrested by them. And I think that that alone is pretty indicative of the kind of nonsense that we're going to be treated to throughout this movie.
Nonsense.
But as things go, these teams would eventually work things out and team up together in order to stop an enemy named Kozak. This movie is absolutely made because of the likability of the teams and the really strange comedic tone that Deca Ranger has at times. It actually meshes better with Abba Ranger than I would have initially expected.
Ooh, another Kamen Rider crossover.
Next up is Saber and Zenkaiger Superhero Senki. And I know this will probably surprise some of you guys. This is a theatrical movie, and it is a crossover between Kamen Rider Saber and Zenkaiger to celebrate the Kamen Rider 50th anniversary and the Super Sentai 45th anniversary. The catchphrase of this movie is straightforward heroes, half of the century.
Dang.
Now, Saber might not be one of my favorite Kamen Rider series, and Zenkaiger gets quite a bit of hate from the community at large, but the thing is that this is another heavy dose of fan service, and honestly, even if you're not into Saber or Zenkaiger, I would still highly recommend this film, because it's another one of those let's see how many characters we can get on screen at one time kind of movies. If you are a fan of Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, this is an absolute must-watch. This movie does an excellent job at showcasing both franchises, and whenever you see Kamen Rider Ichigo and Aka Ranger standing side by side, I don't know how you could not be hyped by that. If you're a fan of Toei, definitely check this one out.
Oh, I will.
Next up is Go Onger 10 Years Grand Prix. This is considered a V-Cinema release, despite having a very, very tiny theater run prior to a Blu-ray release. This film, of course, takes place 10 years after the show, and if you're a fan of Go Onger, it's an absolute no-brainer.
スマイルスマイル
In my opinion, this show has a great cast, and it's really cool to catch up, until we realize that the Go Ongers have been labeled as terrorists, and it is illegal for them to operate as rangers, and Saki is working for the government while directly opposing the rest of the group. The setup here is strong, and I think because Saki was such a likable character on the original series, this serves as a strong hook to keep you interested, because you're definitely going to root for and want to see her redemption here. One thing that I really like about this movie is the Rangers getting made fun of for their flip phones because it's old technology now. And there's some cool kind of sci-fi elements to this film that you might not expect. Some movies are just like a bigger episode, but this feels unique. Not just because it's a 10-year anniversary film, but the story and the vibes here are pretty different from other Sentai movies. Next up at 16 is Deca Ranger the Movie, Full Blast Action. This is a theatrical film that takes place between episodes 23 and 29 of Deca Ranger. In this movie, our heroes pursue a group of criminals and fight for the prosperity of planet Leslie, and their inhabitants, the Leslians, by returning the stolen Golden Snow.
私もスペシャルポリスなの。レスリー製のね。
In this movie, we meet a woman named Marie who is also from Special Police, but she's from Planet Leslie, and things aren't really what they seem. Obviously, with this being a Deca Ranger movie, the mystery theme is nothing new to this series, but this is a huge mystery, and although it kind of feels like just a huge episode, this movie is loaded with action, and it of course features Deca Ranger, one of the most popular Sentais, so I would say that this is a must-watch.
チュチュあわわ。チュチュチュあわわ。
If you're watching through Deca Ranger again, or for the first time, don't forget to set a little time aside to watch this movie.
Mentally noted. Alright, final 15 movies left. So we'll stop here and continue on as we go to the next part. But I hope you guys are enjoying this. I still am. I'm taking a lot of notes over what kind of crossover movies I want to see now. Ooh, I really want to see that Super Sentai Exo Kaisa Tyson. Ooh, that looks good. Anyway, you guys take care. I'll see you in the next video. Looking forward to seeing what other good movies are recommended from the remaining 15 on this list. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care for now. Bye.